Meet student learning needs. If you want your students to better connect God's world and God's Word, meet their needs. I'm Michael Essenburg of Close the Gap Now, and I want to share with you 5 needs students have regarding connecting God's world and God's Word. And if you can meet needs like these, your students will be able to make better connections between God's world and God's Word. Students need to understand the importance of connections. They need to understand the importance of connecting God's world and God's Word. When students think something is important, they tend to learn it. Ways you can help students understand the importance of connecting God's world and God's Word is by teaching lessons on connections, by giving assessments that require your students to connect God's world and God's Word, and by putting up a bulletin board. Students need to understand that connections can be made. Students need to understand that God's world and God's Word can be connected. Ways you could help students do this is by putting up a poster of biblical principles that fit with what they're studying in class, by having them apply those principles to what they're studying, or by having them memorize a relevant Bible verse and apply it to the part of God's world they're studying. To make better connections between God's world and God's Word, students might need to learn more biblical principles. Principles like, all truth is God's truth, or be content with what God provides, or our bodies belong to God. To make better connections, students might need to experience more engaging instruction. Things like asking questions or discussion or journaling. And to make better connections, students might need more time in class to reflect. You know, students are busy, and if you can give them more time in class to reflect, a few more minutes, maybe even longer than that, to reflect on how God's world and God's Word are connected, they'll make better connections. I want to encourage you to meet student needs. Meeting your students' needs will help them better connect God's world and God's Word.